Good morning, students. Welcome back to another Waidsum Academy video. Today we'll be learning about IGCSE Biology, Chapter 15, Hormones, Homeostasis, and Tropic Responses. In this section, we will learn about hormones as a chemical substance, what they do, what types of glands produces them, and we'll also learn about homeostasis, what is homeostasis, the process, and everything we need to know. So let's begin. To start off with, what are hormones? Hormones is a chemical substance that are produced by glands. It is transported through the bloodstream to one or more target organs. There they have an effect which alter the activities of these organs. So basically, when your organ is doing something, a hormone is a type of chemical that they alter the change of this activity of these organs. Hormones can influence growth, development, and activity of an organism. They are basically chemical messengers that help various parts of the body to respond, develop, and work together smoothly. For example, the hormones such as adrenaline. You ever heard of the flight and fight response? That's actually a type of effects caused by a hormone, the adrenaline hormone. They influence various functions of the organs and muscles in the body. When you are in a situation that causes us to react quickly and run faster or fight faster, the hormone adrenaline is activated, causing our body to become 10 times stronger and smarter than it normally is. Hormones help control and coordinate the bodily activities, so therefore the hormone production must be carefully controlled to prevent the disastrous results. For example, thyroxine. Thyroxine is produced in our human body in many organisms, but if too little thyroxine is produced in a tadpole, a tiny frog will produce. The metamorphosis, a change into the adult form, is sped up, causing a very tiny frog. That is why hormones need specific amounts produced. When you produce too much or too little, it can give permanent effect to the body. So what are hormones produced? All the glands that you have seen so far have a duct or a tube. These ducts actually allow the hormones to travel through them. Such glands that have a duct is called an exocrine glands. Glands such as the sweat gland. The sweat gland has a duct that carries the sweat out of the body. So these type of glands are considered exocrine glands. However, exocrine glands do not produce hormones. No, they do produce hormones. They just travel through a duct. Hormones produced by a ductless gland is called hormones produced by ductless glands. The glands that produce them are called endocrine glands. These glands have no ducts. They do not have a duct that carries its secretion. So most of the time, the hormones travel through the bloodstream. They don't have a duct to carry the hormones. So what are the types of endocrine glands? Well, there's actually many organs that we have in our body are considered endocrine glands, such as the pancreas, kidney, adrenaline gland, and the ovaries in our human beings, which are the testes in males and uterus in females. Here you can see the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, kidney, adrenal gland, ovary in females, and testes in males, pancreas, and kidneys are all considered endocrine glands, and they have no ducts. So the hormones travel through the bloodstream in our body. So you should also understand that the hypothalamus that are located in the brain is actually one of the most important organ in our human body. The hypothalamus has the main role and is in charge of allowing the activation of these hormones. Despite it being very tiny, according to science, it's actually the size of a pea, a tiny little pea, a pea vegetable. Yeah, its hypothalamus is the size of a pea. Despite this small size, it's actually very important to the human body. So what are the main roles of the endocrine glands? Well, as I said, the hypothalamus regulates the secretion of some important hormones. These hormones are released by an endocrine gland known as the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is right under the hypothalamus. They have the posterior lobe and the anterior lobe, and these two parts make the pituitary gland. Now, the pituitary gland is the hypothalamus controls what the pituitary gland secretes. And down here, we have more endocrine glands such as the kidney, pancreas, adrenal gland, and ovary and testes. The adrenal gland, as the name assumes, it actually is the gland in charge of producing the hormone known as adrenaline. The adrenaline that you use when you're in a situation known as the flight and fight response. The adrenaline gland is the gland that secretes the adrenaline. The pancreas, however, it contains a special groups of cells called the islets of Langerhans. There is where the insulin and glucagon is produced. The insulin is produced by beta cells, while the glucagon, which is also glucose, is produced by the alpha cells in the islets of Langerhans. The pancreas is in charge of creating both insulin and glucose, and they are stored in the liver. So when there's too much sugar in your body, insulin is secreted, and when there's too little sugar in your body, glucagon and glucose is secreted. Now let's talk about one of the effects of adrenaline. Adrenaline is a type of hormone that are produced in the body. What does it do? Well, basically, it causes our body increase the rate of our body, making us breathe faster, run faster, becoming stronger than we normally are. It also, as you can see in the table, it explains the effects of the adrenaline, which one increases the rate of breathing and increases the rate of heartbeat. So you breathe faster. When you're running, you do this. This is caused by adrenaline. You breathe heavier. Your breath become heavy, and your heartbeat becomes faster. The rate of the heartbeat becomes faster. It also causes our pupil to dilate, and also causes the rate of blood, increases the rate of blood clotting. So when you're afraid, angry, or anxious or stressed, your adrenaline glands secrete the hormone adrenaline, and it is also these effects prepare the body for the fight and flight situations. With a quick response, where a quick response is required, the response that arises from this secretion of adrenaline are temporary. So what are the importance of all these effects? Well, when the increase of rate of breathing and the rate of heartbeat is increased, more oxygen can be taken in for the body for aerobic respiration and giving you the ability to run faster. Oxygen and glucose can be transported more quickly into the muscles, and vision is enhanced to help people see the danger more clearly. And for the increased rate of blood clotting, if the skin is cut, the blood will clot faster to prevent excess loss of blood, so you lose less blood during blood clotting. The person looks more pale, and digestive activity decreases. More blood will be sent to the muscles instead of your organs, causing you to become more stronger. It's more strong. More energy will be released in the muscles, and more glucose will be available for muscle contraction. Now, what is insulin? What are the effects of insulin? Insulin is a hormone produced by the pancreas, and it decreases the blood glucose concentration by making the cell membranes more permeable to glucose, so that the glucose can be absorbed into the cells more quickly. And it also stimulates the liver and muscles to convert glucose into glycogen for storage. So instead of using glycogen, converting the glycogen to glucose, it does the opposite. It converts glucose into glycogen, decreasing the amount of glucose concentration in the blood. So here are a few questions that we've just talked about. They say on the figure on the right shows an outline of the human body. On the diagram, draw and label the gland that secretes insulin, the gland that produces adrenaline. And 2, question A, under what circumstances is the adrenaline secreted? And what effect of the adrenaline on our body? And how does it help us? Well, you can pause this video and try to answer these questions by yourself. And for the answers, I can explain them. But first, you can pause this video and try, because it will help you memorize it more. For question 1A, the answer that the gland that secretes insulin, the answer is pancreas. The pancreas is located at our lower torso. And the gland that produces adrenaline is the adrenal gland, and it's right on top of our kidneys. And the question 2A, the answer is when we are stressed, scared, or afraid, or even angry, that is when adrenaline, the hormone, is secreted. And what are the effects? Well, we've just talked about it. It increases the heart rate, the heartbeat, and increases the rate of breathing. It also increases the rate of blood clotting, preventing too much loss of blood. It decreases the metabolic rate and stimulates the liver and muscles to convert glycogen to glucose. Now let's move on. Comparing endocrine and nervous controls. If you will notice that the nervous system and the endocrine system have similar properties. Not really, but they have generally similar properties. They both do the same effects. They help our bodies to respond to our environment. So what are the difference between endocrine and nervous controls? Well, endocrine control involves hormone, and hormone is considered a chemical substance, whereas the nervous control involves nerve impulses, and nerve impulses is an electrical impulse, and is transmitted by the neurons. As you can see, transmission. Hormones are transported by the blood in endocrine, but however, in exocrine, their hormones are transported by the duct. But in nervous control, impulses are transmitted by the neurons. And these new impulses actually move quite quickly. They are very rapid, as I explained in the chapter 14 in our previous video. The impulses travel really quickly, while hormones might take some time to arrive at the target organ. But however, endocrine hormones have a long-lived effect. It really depends, because it really depends on the type of hormones, because endocrine produces hormones that travel through the blood that arrives at our target organs. Now the type of hormones that arrives at the target organs can have effects that can depend, like short-lived duration and long-lived duration. The adrenaline have a short-lived duration. It only happens when we are angry, nervous, anxious, or afraid. However, long-lived duration are permanent changes to our body, like the growth hormone. Once you start increasing in size, you cannot go back and decrease in size. Those are the type of permanent changes that the hormone creates. Nervous control have only short-lived effects, which might be when we react to something painful. These are nervous control, and the effect of the pain is only rapid, fast, very fast. And we can't control the hormones produced. The endocrine system isn't voluntary, it's involuntary, always involuntary. That means that the amount of hormones that is secreted in our body cannot be controlled by us. However, in the nervous control, it can be both voluntary or involuntary. Now, the response, the target organs, where does the hormone affect the area of response? Well, in endocrine control, the hormones can affect more than one target organ. That means that the multiple organs can be affected by a single amount of hormones. Whereas for the nervous control, nerve impulses are usually localized, meaning how it has one specific area it will affect. Now we've talked about the hormones. What are hormones? We're going to go into homeostasis. What is homeostasis, and how does it help our body? Homeostasis is actually the maintenance of a constant internal environment. The internal environment refers to the conditions within the body of the organism. In humans, this includes the blood and tissue fluid. Homeostasis is basically the process that ensures that our body fluids are kept within narrow limits, and factors such as body temperature, water concentration, and blood glucose concentration are all kept at a constant level. So basically, in our body, there must be a constant and specific level of concentration that our body needs, such as temperature, water concentration, and blood glucose concentration, in order to stay healthy. By ensuring a relatively stable internal environment, homeostasis allows an organism to be independent of changes of the external environment. Have you ever wondered why people have the ability to live in different temperatures? Someone could live in the desert and could travel to the Antarctica, the cold places, the northern side of Earth, and still manage to survive. This is because of homeostasis. Basically, the internal body temperature or internal environment is kept at a constant level, a stable constant level. So this allows us to travel, this allows us to be independent of changes despite the change of the external environment. Why does our body need to be kept constant? That's a good question. The environment conditions outside our bodies are always changing. Sometimes it can be extremely cold and humid, or sometimes it can be very hot and sunny. But why our body needs to be kept in a constant temperature? Well, one reason is because we have enzymes in our body. Enzymes are a biological catalyst. And these enzymes in our body can only work within a certain range of temperatures. Changes in the body temperature may cause the enzyme to become inactive or denature. Enzymes basically have work to do in our body, and when we don't have a constant body temperature, such as too high temperature or too low temperature, the enzymes can denature, which is destroy. And why must tissue fluid be kept at a constant pH and water potential? So body temperature isn't the only thing that must be kept constant in our internal environment. Water concentration and blood glucose concentration also must be kept constant. But why? Well, when the pH of a tissue fluid affects the enzyme reaction in the cells and harm the body, drastic changes in the water potential also affect the cells. Basically, when the water becomes a little bit too acidic or too alkalinic, the enzyme reactions in the drastic changes will be made in the water potential. So the composition of the tissue fluid must be kept within very narrow limits, and this will help ensure that the tissue fluid is kept at a constant pH and water potential. And why does blood glucose need to be kept constant? Well, the body cells need glucose for cellular respiration, and cellular respiration provides the cells with energy to perform their vital activities. So a drastic change in the blood glucose concentration can very be dangerous. Ever wondered why your parents do not allow you to eat too much sugar, but at the same time doctors say it's healthy to eat a bit of sugar but not too much? Well, this is because your body needs to have a constant blood glucose concentration, not too much sugar and not too little sugar. This will allow the body this allows the body cells to be ready to experience cellular respiration, and they provide the cells energy to perform their activities. So homeostasis involves negative feedback. In homeostasis control, the body reacts to bring about an opposite effect to the changes detected. What is well, to start with, we need to understand what negative feedback is. Negative feedback is basically when a change is made, the feedback will respond by causing an opposite change to respond to the change. It will respond to the change made. So when you I'll give you an example. We have a seesaw here. When we add heavy weight here, the seesaw responds by pulling this side down and bringing this side up. So it will cause the seesaw to be bent and look something like this. This is a type of negative feedback. A change is made to counterattack the first change made to the feedback. And homeostasis is a perfect example of negative feedback. One example, in homeostatic control, as I said, the body reacts to to bring an opposite effect to a change detected. So when our body becomes too cold, when our body becomes too cold, homeostasis allows the body to conserve heat energy, allowing us to stay warm. When the body is too hot, homeostasis makes our body release heat. And there are many effects that happens during this process. Now, as you can see in this diagram, it shows what happens during homeostasis and during negative feedback. This is normal. When the seesaw is normal, this is the basic set point. This is the normal set point. When a stimulus, basically a condition, a change made, the condition rises above normal. The receptor detects this change, detects the stimulus, and sends the message to the control center. The control center sends the messages to the corrective mechanism, and this corrective mechanism may create a change to allow the condition to decrease, setting it back to the normal set point, and it's officially a loop. This entire process is considered a negative feedback. And the same can be said for this. When a stimulus is made, this time a decrease in temperature, the receptor detects the stimulus, sends the message to the control center, and the control center sends the message to the corrective mechanism. The corrective mechanism then does a change that allows the condition to increase the temperature, setting it back to the normal. So this is an example of regulation of blood glucose. The blood normally contains around 70 to 90 mg of glucose per 100 centimeter cube of blood. The glucose level in our blood rises after a sugary meal. When we eat something sweet like candies and biscuits and cookies, our blood glucose, the glucose levels in our blood rises. And sometimes it can fall when we do vigorous physical exercise or starve ourselves. So when there's less food in our body systems, or the amount we do a very heavy exercise, the blood levels, the glucose level in our blood decreases. So what happens when there's very high amount of glucose concentration in our blood? So here you can see this is the normal set point. And then let's say someone eats something sugary. The blood glucose concentration rises above normal. This is considered the stimulus, the change made in our body. The receptor, also known as the control center, which is in this case is the islet of Langerhans and the pancreas, are stimulated. From there, the islets of Langerhans secrete insulin into the bloodstream. Blood transport this insulin into the liver and muscles. Insulin increases the permeability of cell membranes of the body cells, allowing glucose to be absorbed more quickly by the cells. And the insulin causes the liver and muscles to convert excess glucose to glycogen. And glycogen is what is stored in the liver and muscles for extra. Then the blood glucose concentration decreases, and this provides a feedback to the receptor to reduce the insulin production. So when the counterattack for the change has been made, a message is sent back to the pancreas to reduce the amount of insulin produced so that it could stay at the normal set point. Now, what happens when there is a reduce of glucose levels in our blood made? The stimulus, the blood glucose concentration falls below normal, and the receptor, also known the control center, which is known as the islet of Langerhans in the pancreas, are stimulated, and this time it sends a message to the liver to convert the glucagon into the bloodstream. They secrete the glucagon into the bloodstream. The glucagon causes the conversion of the glycogen back to glucose, and from the liver, glucose enters the bloodstream, increasing the glucose concentration in the blood, and this provides a feedback back to the pancreas to tell the liver to stop producing stop producing glycogen. So this entire process is considered a negative feedback. Now, what happens when the blood lacks insulin? Basically, diabetes. Diabetes have two types, type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. And when there's too much sugar in our blood, the insulin have a role of reducing this amount of glucose, this amount of sugar. But sometimes it's not always like that. And when the blood lacks insulin, type 1 and type 2 diabetes are created. If there's type 1 diabetes, patients can be treated using insulin. Insulin is usually injected into the fat tissues under the skin. So what is wrong though? Well, the issue is in type 1 diabetes, glucose cannot be stored as glycogen, and this gives a rise into the condition known as diabetes mellitus. Basically, back here, when the insulin is secreted into the blood, this part where the excess glucose is converted back to glycogen, people with type 1 diabetes cannot do this. That means the glucose cannot be converted into glycogen. When this happens, this is considered diabetes mellitus or type 1 diabetes. So how can type 1 diabetes be treated? With insulin, but you have to inject it. You have to inject insulin into their bloodstream to allow the glucose to be converted into glycogen. But there's an issue. Not sometimes it's not only that the fact that the glucose cannot be converted into glycogen, but also because the body, the islet of Langerhans, cannot produce insulin. This is also known as type 1 diabetes. And when not enough insulin is produced, the glucose levels in our blood rises. But if we can inject insulin into the bloodstream physically, then you could treat a person with type 1 diabetes. Now here's a more let's practice questions. The human body is controlled by two systems. State the name of the systems and briefly compare the two controls. And explain the homeostatic control of blood glucose concentration by insulin and glucagon. Now we'll move on to the human skin and temperature regulation. Remember when I said homeostasis is the process of keeping the internal environment constant? Well, what does the homeostasis actually do? What do they do to cause this internal environment constant? We'll learn in 15.5. Let's go. Now here is a human skin. Your skin forms a protective layer covering our body surface. It also plays a role in regulation of our body temperature and excretion. So how does our skin perform these functions? To understand this, we must learn the structure of the skin. So here is a diagram and instruction of the human skin. It shows the skin is composed of two parts, an outer part called the epidermis and the inner thick part known as the dermis. So here, as you can see, contains the skin polypa, the sweat pores, and the granular layer. The upper part of our skin is called the epidermis. While this entire part where the skin hair follicle and nerves are with the blood capillaries, this entire section is called the dermis. And the lower part is called the subcutaneous fat. Basically, all this here is fat. So this entire part shows what our entire skin, what the skin looks like. So what are the structures of the skin and how do they help regulate body temperature? Well, you see these blood vessels, the blood vessels in the dermis, the blood capillaries and blood vessels in the dermis. What are the structures involved in regulating the blood temperature? Blood vessels, hairs, sweat glands, and sensory receptors, and subfat, basically fat. They all have roles in regulating body temperature. Now, as you can see here, there are many different types of structures that help build the skin, such as the hair. Sorry, give me a second, my mouse is laggy. Such as the hair, skin papilla, sweat pores, and so on. The blood vessels in the dermis are present in the dermis. The arteries constrict or dilate when the muscles in the arterial walls contract or relax. The contraction and dilation of the arteries help regulate the body temperature. And when the skin arteries dilate, more blood is sent to the blood capillaries in the skin. This is shown when we blush or become flush after vigorous activities. This is how our looks like. This is why our skin turns red when we hit it too much or do very vigorous activities, or even when we blush. When someone becomes embarrassed or shy, when they blush, our skin becomes red. It doesn't only occur in our faces, it could also occur in hands and legs. When the skin arteries constrict, less blood flows through the capillaries, and this causes us to become pale. The skin becomes more pale and less red as the skin arteries constrict. Now the hair are produced by the epidermis, and in the malfichi layer of the epidermis sinks into the dermis, forming a hollow tube. Inside this hollow tube, inside this hollow tube is called the hair follicle, and here is where the hair grows. Inside the hair follicle, here is where the hair grows. So the malfichian layer goes deeper to the dermis, creating a hollow hole called the hair follicle, and here is where our hair grows. The skin hair grows. And at the base of the hair follicle is a mass of tissue called the hair papilla. The hair papilla contains blood capillaries and nerves that is covered with the epidermal cells that constantly divide, pushing new cells outwards. The cells that are divided, pushing the new cells upwards, the cells that are pushed outwards are gradually die, and they harden to reform hair. People always say that hair are made of dead cells, and this is true. That is why it doesn't hurt to cut or shave. So in the hair papilla, here is where most of the alive cells located. When they are pushed outwards to this hair, to the top of the hair, they become dead. They gradually die and harden to form hair. That is why hair are created with a protein and with dead cells. The hair erector muscles that are attached to the hair follicles are affected when these muscles contract. The hair on the end stands, and the skin around the hair is raised, producing goose pimples in humans. Goose pimples are those tiny pimples around your hair that surround the hair. These are considered goose pimples. Now we're going to talk about the sweat glands. Each sweat gland is a collided tube formed by the downgrowth of the epidermis. Here's a sweat gland. Now each sweat gland is a collided tube formed by the downgrowth of the epidermis. It forms a tight knot in the epidermis. Basically, this sweat gland is produced by blood vessels and the downgrowth of the epidermis. This forms a very tight knot. They tie each other together, become entangled. The secreted sweat flows through the sweat duct to a sweat pore that opens at the skin surfaces. This is a sweat pore, and when it opens, sweat pours out of our skin. The secreted sweat is actually made up of water, and it contains dissolved salts and small amounts of urea. Since sweat contains small amounts of metabolic waste products such as urea, the skin is considered an excretory organ. This is why the skin is considered an exocrine gland and not an endocrine gland. You see this sweat duct? This is the duct. This is the sweat. This sweat gland is actually an exocrine gland, and the sweat travels through the sweat duct that arrives at the sweat pore allowing sweat to travel through the skin, to arrive at the skin. Sweat is secreted continuously. The amount of sweat produced varies depending on the external and internal environmental conditions. The sweat produced in very small quantities evaporates almost immediately, and sweat produced in large quantities appear as droplets on the skin or as running streaks of liquid. So sweat is a means by which our skin regulates body temperature. When the body is too hot and too much sweat is produced, it evaporates, leaving a cooling system that allows our skin to feel much cooler than it actually is. No matter how much hot or cold the temperature is, our body is always producing sweat. What only changes is the amount of sweat produced. So the amount of sweat produced depends on the external and internal environment conditions. Now we will talk about the sensory receptors or sense organs that are in the body. The sensory or sense organs are in the structure in the body that detects the change of the environment, aka stimuli. The nerve ending in the skin are sensory receptors. They enable us to sense pain, pressure, and temperature. Changes in the external environment receptors that detect change are called thermoreceptors. Now we'll go to how does our body loses heat. When our body loses heat, heat is lost, and through the skin by radiation, more heat loss. Heat is lost. Now we're going to talk about how our body loses heat. When our body loses heat, there are different ways that heat is lost. Through the skin by radiation, convection, and to a limited extent by convection. And also by evaporation of wet water in the sweat from the surface of the skin, in the feces and urine, and in the air that is exhaled. Doing so, heat is lost through the body. Example, this is the skin. The skin arteriole dilates, increasing the blood flow into the skin. The shunt vessels constrict, and more blood flows into the skin surface. This leads to greater heat loss. But here, when the body gains heat or is trying to conserve the heat in the body, the skin arteriole constricts, decreasing blood flow to the skin. The shunt vessels dilate, and this allows less blood to flow through the skin surface and reduce heat loss. Now we're going to be talking about the hypothalamus. Remember when I talked about the hypothalamus and I said it was one of the most important endocrine gland in our body. The hypothalamus in the brain monitors and regulates the body temperature it receives information. So the amount of hormones that are secreted by the glands are made by the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus decides how much of a hormone will be secreted by the gland. It receives information about temperature changes from two sources: the thermoreceptors in the skin that detect the temperature from the environment, and the thermoreceptors in the hypothalamus that detect the temperature of the blood. So the thermoreceptors in the skin detect the external environment, while the thermoreceptors in the hypothalamus detect the internal environment. The hypothalamus has both roles in nervous and endocrine system, and it serves as a connection between the two systems. It regulates many basic functions of the blood, such as body temperature, water balance, and heart rate, in addition to increasing or decreasing sex secretion of other glands. Now, what happens to the body when the body temperature begins to rise? So here is our normal body temperature, but the body temperature begins to rise. Let's say someone has fever or something. The thermoreceptors in the skin and the hypothalamus are stimulated. That means the thermoreceptors located in both the skin and hypothalamus detect the change made. This body temperature rises is the stimulus, and this are the receptor. Now, there are many things that happen to fight against the increase of body temperature. The arteries of the skin dilate and the shunt vessels constrict. In the skin, the arteries in the skin they dilate and the shunt vessels constrict. So this allows more blood flows to the skin surface, and this leads to greater heat loss. The dilation of the arteries are called vasodilation. When the skin artery dilates, this entire process is called vasodilation. It allows more blood to flow through the blood capillaries in the skin, and more heat will be lost through the skin by radiation and convection. Sweat glands become more active and more sweat is produced as water in the sweat evaporates from the skin, cooling our skin, and more latent heat of vaporization is lost from the body. And the metabolic rate is decreased. This reduces the amount of heat released within the body, and therefore the body temperature is then decreased, allowing the normal body temperature, allowing the body to return to the normal body temperature. This entire process is considered a negative feedback. So what happens when the body temperatures begin to decrease? So instead of increasing the body temperatures, this decides to increase. While the body temperature falls below normal, the thermoreceptors in the skin and the hypothalamus detect it and are stimulated. So this time, the arteries of the skin constrict, and this is known as vasoconstriction. The arteries in the skin, they constrict, which decreases the blood that flows to the skin, and the shunt vessel dilates, allowing more blood to flow through here. So less heat is carried to the skin surface and less blood flows to the skin surface. The sweat glands become less active and less sweat is produced. Sweat never stops producing, it's just that it varies the amount of sweat produced. So when the temperature becomes cold, less sweat is produced as less water in the sweat evaporates from the skin surface. The metabolic rate is increased, and this increases the amount of heat released within the body. And when the above responses are not sufficient to prevent a drop in body temperature, shivering occurs. When we shiver, the rapid speed of the spasmodic contraction of the skeletal muscles increases the amount of heat released. So therefore, the body temperature increases and the body is returned to the normal body temperature. So here are a few questions. Let's practice 15.5. The figure on the right shows a vertical section through the human skin. A states the names of the structures labeled A and D. Which of the structures is involved in excretion, and how does the labeled structures involve in the regulation of body temperature? Now, before I tell you the answers, please pause this video and try to answer some of the questions. Pause this video and try to answer all of the questions and see if you can get most of them right. It will help you practice for your upcoming IGCSE exams. Now that you can have, if you have paused it, if you finished and unpause this video, I can tell you the answers. A is considered the nerve ending thermoreceptors. Basically, this is the thermoreceptors in our skin. This is the sweat gland. C is the sweat gland. B is the blood capillaries, while D is called the hair erector muscle. The hair erector muscle helps the hair to stand or droop when the body temperature is high or low. Now we're going to tropic responses. In this section, we're going to describe phototropism as a response in plants. So remember, humans are not the only organisms with hormones that can react to a stimuli. Plants also have hormones that react to stimuli, and in this top section we're going to learn about tropic responses. Sensitivity in plants. Plants, like animals, possess the ability to respond to external stimuli, as I said, and unicellular organisms such as Iglena are able to move from place to place by moving their flagella. So this is a type of unicellular organism called Chlamydomonas. Interesting name. Chlamydomonas. And they have this tail that's called the flagellum. Now this flagellum responds to light by moving towards it. Most land plants, are rooted and unable to move from place to place. Some parts of the plant can move, like leaves and stem, can move into the direction of light. This is called the sensitivity in plants. So what is tropism? The movements of plant parts are affected by external stimuli. Examples of stimuli include light, gravity, and water, and chemical substances, as well as a foreign body in contact with the plant. Many plant movements are growth movements, and the growth movement is called a tropic movement or tropism. So tropism is the growth movement of plants. If a plant part moves towards the stimulus, it is said to show positive tropism. And if a plant part moves away from the stimulus, it is said to show negative tropism. And tropism has two types: phototropism and gravitropism. As the name suggests, phototropism, remember when I said photo means light? Well, phototropism is a response in which a plant part grows towards or away from an unidirectional light source. The direction of the growth of movement depends on the direction of which the light comes. So this is a type of experiment. They have shoots of the pot placed in a box that bends towards the light. So we have a wooden box and we have a plant pot. When you put seeds in the pot and you shine a light at a specific area, the shoots of the plant will grow towards and bend towards the light, as it's said here. This is an example of phototropism. Now here is a different type of plant, which is known as coleoptiles. Coleoptiles bend towards the light. This is the same as the other experiment, 15a. In 15b, the coleoptiles bends towards the light, and the region of the elongation is where the marked segments are spaced out. The bending occurs in the region of elongation. And here is 15c, coleoptile with the cut tipped off. No growth or bending occurred. It shows that plants do experience sensitivity. Now let's go to gravitropism, another type of tropism. Gravitropism, also known as geotropism, is the response in which plant's part grows towards away or towards gravity. So the shoot grows upwards or downwards depending on where the gravity is occurred at. So in this experiment, you can see that the plant shoots are horizontal, and here the shoots are vertical. The shoot plays horizontal, curve upwards. They grow like this. While the shoots placed vertically also continue to grow upwards. These shoots are negatively gravitopic. They respond to the stimulus of gravity by growing away from the gravity. So wherever gravity is going, the gravity is here, is going downwards, the plants move upwards against the gravity. And this is known as negative gravitropic. Positive gravitropic is where the plants grow with the gravity. So instead it grows like this direction, with the gravity. And here are more experiments you can try to do to experience gravitropism in plants. Finally, we'll go to clinostat. What is a clinostat? People use an experiment called clinostat to study the tropism in plants. A clinostat can be used to negate the effect of the stimulus. A setup clinostat was shown in this experiment. Here they have a motor, a cork, a damp cotton wool, and a radical, plastic case, and moist air. In this procedure, they use some seedings of short straight radicals onto a damp cotton and turn on the turnable of a clinostat, and they make sure that the radicals are horizontal. The radicals remain horizontal, they don't change, and the effect of gravity is negated by the clinostat, as the clinostat allows gravity to act on all sides of the radicals equally. So how does tropism work? Tropism in plants involves receptors and effectors, just like human beings. A growth promoting substance called auxin plays an important role in tropism. Basically, when a if the tip is cut off, the growth of the coleoptile is halted, and the coleoptile with the tip is cut off and replaced. If the tip of the coleoptile is cut off and replaced back, the growth of the coleoptile is resumed. So there, the tip is separated from the coleoptile stump with a layer of aqueous gelatin. The growth of the coleoptile occurs normally. This indicates that auxin diffuses downward with the aqueous gelatin, and hence it must be soluble in water. However, if the aqueous gelatin is replaced with a thin layer of fatty material, the normal growth of the coleoptile is again halted, stopped, and this indicates that auxin is insoluble in fats. If the tip is separated from the coleoptile stump with a non-porous mica plate, the growth of the coleoptile is altered, and this indicates that the mica plate prevents the diffusion of auxin downwards. And here they explain more of the growth of a coleoptile with agar blocks. Agar blocks block the auxin transfer to the coleoptiles with the tip cut off. Agar blocks with no auxin on a coleoptile with the tip cut off. So you can see with auxin, the coleoptile has the ability to rapidly grow, but with no oxygen, the cochlear pals stay constant as it is. And when the blocks of the oxygen transfer to a cochlear pal within the typical tube is placed on one side, bending occurs. The cochlear pal bends away from the side until the agar block is placed. What is the role of oxygen in plant tropism? Well, control of plant tropism and graft tropism by oxygen depends. When light shines on the root of all sides, the tip of the root receptor is sensitive to the stimulus of the light, and this tip produces oxygen. The oxygen diffuses from the tip of the region of the cell elongation, and oxygen is evenly distributed to all sides of the shoot. The shoot is then grown vertically upwards. But when the light shines on one side of the shoot, the oxygen accumulates here and the cells elongate faster. And oxygen diffuses down from the tip and accumulates in the shaded side of the shoot. And the cells on the shaded side elongate faster than the cells with the side of the light, and hence the shoot bends towards the light. Now we're going to finally discuss the importance of tropism. What is the importance of tropism? Well, phototropism in the shoot causes the shoot to grow towards the sunlight, and this enables leaves to absorb maximum amount of sunlight for photosynthesis. And negative gravitropism in the shoot causes the shoot to grow away from the earth into the atmosphere, and this enables them to obtain sunlight for photosynthesis. Positive gravitropism in the roots causes the roots to grow downwards into the earth, and this enables them to anchor the plant firmly into the soil. It is the soil that the roots obtain water and mineral oils. Now, to quickly end this video, we're going to finally look at the oxygen roles in plants of gravitropism. Here, the negative gravitropism in the shoot. The shoot elongates lower. Here, the tip of the shoot is stimulated by the stimulus of the gravity, and it produces oxygen. Oxygen accumulates on the lower side of the shoot, and the cells on the lower side elongate faster than the cells on the upper side, and hence the shoot bends upwards. And here is the root. The tip of the root is stimulated and produces oxygen. The oxygen accumulates on the lower side of the root and inhibiting cell elongation. The cells on the upper side elongate faster than the cells on the lower side, and hence the root bends downwards. And this is the end of tropism, and also the end of chapter 15. Here are a few questions of Let's Practice 15.6. What is tropism, and how does the root of the plant respond to gravity? You can pause this video and try to answer this question, and we'll finally discuss what we've learned. Homeostasis, we've learned about hormones, homeostasis, and tropism in plants, such as phototropism and gravitropism. We've learned about how homeostasis maintains a constant internal environment in our body through negative feedback. And we've also learned about the hormonal control in our body and how the endocrine carries out the types of hormones that help us react to the stimuli in our body. And with this, we've come to the end of chapter 15. Here with the end of chapter 15, here are the acknowledgements. Thank you so much for watching this video, and this is the end of chapter 15. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comment section. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.